Okay, almost there, 1 minute out. Welcome, everyone. How many times have you stood on the line at a hunt test or a field trial and failed to get those memory birds cleanly? When you were standing there with your dog, what emotions did you experience? Did you feel awkward, nervous, pressured, frustrated, maybe a little clunky? What about your dog? What have you noticed about them? Did they look worried, uncertain, forgetful, maybe unconvinced or stuck? Well, you're not alone. I've been there myself. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Kevin Sheff, and most people know me as the retriever coach. I've spent the last 30 years training and handling retrievers. They include 6 Canadian national champions, multiple US and Canadian national finalists, and dogs with hundreds of all age points. But in 2015, I decided to step away from training full time to focus on what I love to do the most. And that's helping people like you learn how to train and handle your own dogs. Now, over the years, I've spent a lot of time figuring out why dogs fail multiple marks and developing ways to make sure they're more successful. While some of you might think that your dog's problem stems from a poor memory, the truth is they're failing because you're not placing a focus on the fundamentals that multiple marks required. About 4 or 5 basic things that you can easily work on to get better results on memory retrieval. Today, I'm going to share a small part of the Fetch training system and allow you to experience what it's like to be a member. You see, I have a strong belief that we can't just rely on a bunch of drills or instructions to build a champion. In most cases, that just leads to frustration and failure. But if we want to be competitive, if we want to succeed, we need to know the what, the why, and the how. What is the root cause of the problem? Why do I need to focus on the things that I do? Or what do I need to focus on when I do the things that I do? How does the training work? What is my dog thinking or feeling, and why? How should I react if A or B happens? Only when we understand all of these things can we use the drills and the instructions to build a sound, skilled, and confident retriever and handler. Fetch does just that. My videos, webinars just like this one, Q&A sessions, my step-by-step training program and one-on-one coaching, yes, you get access to me when you join, guides you on your journey toward achieving goals. And if you've been thinking about joining or you want to learn more, please visit www.theretrievercoach.com/fetch. Now, before we dive into the content of tonight's webinar, I'm going to turn it over to my assistant, Kelsey, and she's going to do a little housekeeping.
Thanks so much, Kevin. It is great to be here with all of you. Hey, Kevin, while I do housekeeping, if you wouldn't mind checking out the features in the chat to make sure people can chat with everybody, and I'll go through the housekeeping. Guys, thank you so much for being here tonight. I am going to help you with a few things this evening. If you have any technical questions, you can't hear, things like that, go ahead and put that in the chat, and I will be there to help you. If you would like to submit a question to Kevin, we will have a few minutes at the end of tonight's webinar to take questions. We will make sure that they are relevant to the multiple mark topic. So if you've got a question on tonight's content, please put that in the chat. We'll get it to Kevin at the end of the webinar. We also have a short workbook that accompanies tonight's discussion. You got that in an email here today, right before the webinar. If you didn't get that, I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat so you have a link to that. Kevin, did you have any luck with getting the chat settings?
I think I did. Can you just double check it for me?
I don't see that I can chat with everybody, but that might just be on my end here.
Give me 1 second to
Yeah,
double
no
check.
problem.
There we go. I'm
Works
fixing that.
great. Perfect.
Okay.
So,
Good.
yep. Kevin, thanks so much, guys. I'll be here in the chat. Let me know how I can help you. And I'm going to send you a link to the workbook right now so you've got it for you. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, thank you, Kelsey. Why don't you throw that agenda up for me? Okay, so here's what we're going to cover tonight, guys. Number one, I want to go over the reasons why dogs struggle to do multiple retrieves. Then we're going to jump into how we build confidence in memory. Number three, the mechanics we use to execute a multiple. I do workshops all the time, and this is where I see a lot of people and dogs struggle. Number four, I'm going to teach you a training setup that's going to help you build in the skills and the mechanics and the confidence that your dog needs to perform a multiple. I've got a challenge for you near the end. And then we'll, as Kelsey said, we're going to open it up to questions. All right, Kelsey, let's go ahead and throw up that next slide for me, please. Bear with me. All right, so there are essentially three reasons why teams struggle with multiple marking tests. Number one, they lack confidence. And I'm not just talking about the dog here, I'm talking about the handler. And the reason why our dogs tend to lack confidence is because they don't get enough opportunities to get the experience they need with multiple marks. Far too often, we're breaking our test down into singles or singles and a double, and it just isn't giving the dogs enough experience. And the second reason why is that they're not getting enough experience where they have a positive outcome. That's what creates the confidence. Number two, poor mechanics. The handler doesn't follow a procedure to give the dog absolute clarity on the tasks ahead. Again, I find that most people that I see up online, or a lot of people that I see up online with their dog trying to form a multiple, look like they're not sure. They're not sure how to communicate with their dog. They're not sure what they should do next. They're not sure what order they should do things in. They don't know how much time they should take to do things. So this is another area that we need to get better in. And number three, poor line obedience standards. Here, if we don't have a dog that goes to the line with us, we're not going to be working together as a team. And when it comes to multiple marks, in fact, almost any advanced training, we have to go to line together. The dog has to be in the right state of mind, a disciplined state of mind, and understand what's permissible and what standards they're responsible for maintaining as far as obedience is concerned. Okay, Kelsey, you go ahead and throw up the next slide for me. Sorry here, give me a chance to get my slides up. Right, there we go. So the next thing I want to chat about is how we build confidence in memory. How do we create the state of mind that a dog needs to have in order to put together multiple marking tests? Well, number one, we've got to begin multiple marks early with our puppy. And I know many of you are already past this stage, but I want to talk about it so that when you get your next puppy, you know how you put together a dog that when they see a multiple, they go, let me at it. And I have to tell you that when I get a puppy home, I'm certainly doing a lot of singles right off the bat. I'm engaging prey drive. I'm teaching some of the basic mechanics of retrieving. But very early on, usually about 12 to 14 weeks, I begin doing some very simple multiples. I mean, I'm holding a puppy, I'm supporting them, I'm lifting them up a bit. Remember, they're not very big. And I'll take a bumper or a toy and I'll toss it out ahead of me, maybe only 3 or 4 yards. And then I'll just spin the puppy around 180 degrees and throw another bumper or toy out there a few yards, 5 or 6 yards. And they're sitting on a carpet on a golf course like situation. As soon as that second throw lands, I'm sending that puppy off, and they have no choice but to come back toward me because I've turned 180 degrees. I spin around. They've either dropped what's in their mouth or I've taken what's in their mouth. I'm supporting them again, and they're kind of looking out there. And then all of a sudden they spot that second toy, and I let them go. And I do that throughout the entire course of their basics. Of course, things get a little longer. I don't have to hold the dog so much as the dog learns more mechanics. But I'm really beginning multiples young, and I'm giving the dog a lot of them several times a day. In fact, every day that I go out training, so I can do that in my house, in my backyard. I just get those bumpers out or those toys out, and I do multiples, and those multiples turn from doubles into triples and triples into quads while the dog is still doing basics. Now, how do we build confidence and maintain confidence in our dogs as time goes on? Well, the one thing we have to understand about dogs is that as the training progresses, as it's getting more complicated in the marking department, we set the dogs up for failure a lot of the time, especially on those memory retrieves. And what that does is it destroys their confidence in their ability to do a multiple. They could be technically sound, they could know how to fight factors and understand concepts, but if they don't believe in themselves, if they don't believe they have what it takes to go out there and retrieve memory birds, if they're afraid of that task, then they're not in the right state of mind. So what we need to do is we need to regularly build simple multiples into our training plan that are so easy it's nearly impossible for our dogs to fail. And while we're doing that, we're also practicing our mechanics. We're getting very comfortable with them. Things are becoming fluid, second nature, and our confidence goes up too. And that's really important. Kelsey, next slide for me, please. Okay, so next thing I want to talk about is mechanics. And what are the 3 areas or 3 different time periods where we use different mechanics to get our dogs through a set of multiple marks? And there are essentially 3 different times or periods throughout a multiple set of marks where we use mechanics. The first period is during that time when we're getting our dogs ready to watch the marks. We haven't thrown any marks yet, but we're coming to line, we're on the line. What things do we do when we come to line before we throw the marks? The second period is when the marks are being thrown. There are very specific things that we need to do to make sure that dogs see birds, to make sure that dogs aren't moving forward, to make sure that we are moving and our dogs are moving appropriately. And then the third period, and this one has more steps than any of them. This is how we prepare our dogs before we send them for a memory retrieve. We have to get them ready and ensure that they're in the proper state of mind, that they have clarity on the mission before we send them. And we should have a very set, standardized procedure that we follow every time, one that helps ensure that we get the right outcome. Now we're going to dive into each one of these phases in a little more detail. Kelsey, go ahead and throw up the next slide for me. So now I know we have a lot of hunt test people along with our field trial people out there. And this is where I have to pause for a moment and try to convince some of the people out there that are running hunt tests that you need to set up marking tests that have visible throwers, most likely wearing white coats out in the field. When I'm doing workshops, whether it's with a hunt test group or a field trial group, I encourage everyone to run a minimum of 70% of their marks with standout guns. If you're running hunt tests, certainly you have to practice marking tests with hidden guns. Dogs need to understand the mechanics of hidden gun tests and be comfortable doing them. But if we're going to teach our dogs skills, if we're going to teach our dogs how to fight factors, if we're going to teach our dogs marking concepts, we can almost always best do that with standout guns. So this webinar is going to encourage you, regardless of what discipline you're training for, to run with standout guns. All right, so now I can go back to the different phases here in the mechanics for each phase. So we're coming to line with our dog. We have visible gun stations in the field. That's a person standing in the field with a white coat, or potentially it's a stick man or a diamond out in the field that the dog can see. And the very first step is to have our dog sit facing the test and show the dog the gun stations in the order they're being thrown. Why are we doing that? Well, one of the skills that our dogs need to have is the ability to target. That means they need to be able to understand the communication that we use to get them to pick out different spots in the field for retrieve, whether that's before we send them or before we throw the marks. We need to be able to get this dog looking in different places, and they have to understand the communication that we use for that. They also need to understand the body language that we use to get them to turn to face different directions when the birds are being thrown. You have to remember, we can't always talk to our dogs. If we're at a field trial or a hunt test, in most cases, we're not allowed to talk to our dogs. So our dogs have to understand the body language that we use to get them to turn and face different directions to ensure that they see the birds when they're throwing. So when I'm on the line with my dog, as I'm showing the gun stations to the dog in the order in which the birds are going to be thrown, I'm moving my body, and I'll show you this a little bit later. I'm moving my body to get them to look in different directions, and I'm practicing that before I actually throw the birds. The second step here is to make sure that your dog is looking in the direction of the first bird that's going to be thrown, and then call for that bird to be thrown. Next slide, Kelsey. The second phase of a multiple marking test is when the birds are thrown and the dog has to watch the birds. And the first thing that we're going to do once we've called for the first bird to be thrown, is we're either going to step forward or backward and turn our body to face the next retrieve. If I'm stepping backwards, I often drag my foot so that the dog will hear that foot coming back. And that's one of the cues that will cause them to turn toward me, to look in the direction toward me. Getting them to turn away from me is usually quite easily. As I step up and turn, that naturally causes their head to turn. But they don't always see us step backwards. So that's why dragging your foot can help to lure the dog to look in the direction toward you. So once that first bird is down, step forward or backward, dragging a foot and turning your body to face the next throw. And sometimes if the marks are tight, I may not need to move my body at all. The gunshot or the duck call, or simply the fact that the dog is very likely to see that bird being thrown, is all it's going to take to make sure that they do see the bird and no body movement is necessary. Now, earlier on in this lesson, I mentioned that obedience and teamwork were key if we're going to get a multiple set of marks done. And here is where we begin or continue to work on that obedience, continue to work on creating the standards that are necessary for a dog to be able to do a marking test successfully. So if when I'm moving on the mat, my dog moves forward, that's my opportunity to enforce the standard, usually with a correction. I prefer lead corrections myself, or it may be a collar correction of some sort. But I want my dog to know that they have that they can move their head to turn and see marks, that they can move their front feet laterally if they need to turn and see marks, but they cannot move forward. Moving forward is not an option, because the moment your dog begins to move forward, you're no longer part of the team. You no longer can help your dog. So this is your opportunity to enforce that standard. If you need to enforce that standard, or if it has occurred, if a correction has occurred, now's the time to stop the test, have all the throwers pick up the birds, and begin the test again. Denial of retrieve. Not only do you correct the dog, but you deny them the retrieve. This is what will encourage them to take responsibility for meeting that standard and to be part of a team. All right, once your dog is turned to look in the direction of the second mark, call for the throw, and then repeat the procedure for the remaining mark. Now, guys, if you're doing a lot of singles, you might have said, well, this is obvious, Kevin, you don't need to tell me this. But if you're doing a lot of singles, I can tell you this is when you're going to be clunky. This is when you're going to be unsure how to move. This is when you're not going to drag your foot properly. This is when you're going to be too quick or too slow and your dog's not going to see the bird. So practicing this on a very regular basis is absolutely necessary. Understanding these mechanics is absolutely necessary. Next slide, please, Kelsey. All right, so here we are in phase 3, the mechanics for preparing your dog to be sent for a memory retrieve. And this is where a lot of us really could use a lot of help. I think the biggest problem I see is the tempo that people have when they're getting their dog ready and sending them for a memory retrieve. Most people are far too quick. The dog does not have clarity on the mission. And a lot of their mechanics are poor, and they can be miscommunicating what the actual mission is. So I'm going to go over the mechanics and the reasons why I use them here. Number one, as your dog's returning with the bird, the very first thing I want you to do is line their spine up for the next retrieve. Don't worry about their head. Don't worry about where they're looking. Just ensure that their spine is lined up for the next retrieve before you take the bird. And once you've got their spine lined up, now it's important, again, before you go to take the bird, now it's important to move to the operator's position. That position is not right up there by their head. It's not way behind the dog. It's usually close to their butt, close to their their hindquarters. You need to have some of the dog in front of you. If you don't have some of the dog in front of you, you're not going to be able to tell where they're looking. You need to know precisely where they're looking and what they're thinking. If you're too far back, if you're in the back seat, now you can't communicate effectively to get the dog looking in the right direction and thinking the right things. So if the dog is completely ahead of you, you're too far back. So again, just repeating, step one, get their spine lined up and move into the operator's position. One other thing about operator's position, it's not about whether you're far enough forward and back. You want to make sure that there's no light between you and the dog. The closer you are to the dog, the less likely your view of where the dog is looking is skewed. The more easy it is to tell where your dog is looking and what they're thinking. So again, no light between you and your dog. Step two, take the bird, and remember this now, guys, allow them to survey the field for a moment. Far too often, the mistake I see is a handler taking the bird and immediately trying to guide the dog into something, talk them into something, or prevent them from doing something. And I know what some of you are thinking out there. You're thinking about making sure that you get the right first look. But more often than not, that is not as important as giving the dog the opportunity to survey their surroundings and get their bearings. Dogs will often look in the wrong direction and go, wait a second. After a moment, they go, wait a second, there's nothing happened there. I need to look somewhere else. We need to give them the opportunity to eliminate options sometimes. And when they're looking in the wrong direction, they can very easily be eliminating options and talking themselves into the right mission. So slow that down right there. And while they're doing that, use this time to evaluate where they're looking. Look up, look down, look up, look down. Evaluate. Are they looking at the target? Are they looking at the throwing station? Are they looking outside the gun station, away from it? You need to know where they are looking and what they're potentially thinking. Now, once you see the dog has settled in on something and you know that they're potentially looking in the right direction, then you can move on to the next step. Or if they're not looking in the right direction, now you need to quietly and patiently feed them push or pull cues. Those are the cues we use to get a dog to turn their head, not to move their feet. We either tap the front of our leg closest to the dog to pull their head toward us, or we lift the outside leg, the leg furthest away from the dog, and say sit to push their head away from us. And just for any of you out there that are interested in seeing this in real time, I have a video on YouTube. It's part of a series of YouTube videos. This one is on the wagon wheel drill. I think Kelsey's going to put it in the chat, but you can see me working with a dog to feed a dog push-pull cues to get them looking in a specific direction if you need more help with that. But this is your chance. Step 3, we need to get the dog looking in the right direction if they're not. And the mistake that people make here is they get frustrated quickly because the dog is not doing exactly what they want quickly enough. And people start to raise their voice. They start to make bigger movements with their body. They start to bring emotions into the discussion, when really what this is supposed to be is a quiet conversation with my dog. I give it slowly. I have it slowly. I want to give the dog time to process and to problem solve through this act of getting targeted correctly. I don't want to make them anxious. I want to keep them in a calm state of mind, so stay quiet. Once we get them looking in the right direction, the next thing we need to do is pause, because now that the dog is looking in the right direction, it just means that they're looking at a line. It doesn't mean they know what the mission is. It doesn't mean that they know how far they're going, where they need to stop, which way the bird was thrown. So you need to pause right here and let them ask themselves some questions. How far do I have to go? Where was the gunner standing? What were they standing beside? What angle did they throw it at? Did they throw it to the left or the right? All of these things are questions that the dog will get clarity on if you give them the time to do it. And while they're doing this, what I like to do and what I encourage you to do is look for their tails. What are tails? That's the body language that indicates they're ready to be sent. I want you guys not just to watch your dog, but if you're sitting behind the line, I want you to watch other dogs. If the handlers up there are giving their dog time to do this stuff, learn what the tells are. Tells are, number one, those ears start to stand at attention instead of lay flat against their head. Their breathing, their respiratory rate slows down. It goes from to much slower, deeper, to maybe almost still. Sometimes they close their mouth. Sometimes they lean forward. Sometimes they sit up a little bit taller. But it's that body language, those tells that indicate to me that my dog has clarity now, that they're ready. And I can move on to step 6, and that's to send my dog. All right. Let me just make sure I haven't missed anything here. Okay, what I want to do next is to teach you a particular marking setup that's designed to work on all of these things. So what I'm going to have Kelsey do is I'm going to have her put up the next slide for me. We're going to talk about the venue, but I want to remind you guys, what is this test that we're going to do? And what is it designed to work on? Well, the test that we're going to work on is called the wide open equidistant triple. I think I learned most about this from Mike Lardy when I went to his seminars. And he talked about a test he called the JP triple, John Parrott triple. And it was designed to work on these things, to develop confidence in memory, to practice our mechanics. And I've added in here that it gives us the opportunity to insist on the right standards for obedience to ensure that we have a team relationship going on. So the first thing I want to discuss is the venue that you need for this training. Number one, you need a relatively flat field. A flat field is necessary because if you have a lot of big dips in the terrain, your dog will lose sight of the destination from time to time. And when a dog loses sight of the destination, when they're on the way out to the retrieve, they can do things like break down early or get a little lost. So a relatively flat field is important. Number two, it's free of factors. We don't want cover changes that are going to deflect the dog offline to the retrieve. We don't want corner entries into a pond or angle entries out of a pond. We don't want significant crosswinds, those types of things that tend to deflect or cause our dogs to get offline to the retrieve. Number three, we don't want to have things out in the field like bushes and hay bales and mounds that might cause your dog to think there could be a gun station retired behind something out there. So it's a field that's free of all of these things. And number four, we need enough space to separate the marks and add distance to the retrieves. Kelsey, would you throw up the picture of the wide open equidistant triple here? So this is what my wide open equidistant triple looks like. You can see that there's nearly 150 or 140 degrees of separation between the gun stations. They're so far apart that my dogs can't accidentally end up switching or returning to an old fall. As long as they're starting out in the right direction, they're not going to stumble onto the wrong destination. So there's a lot of separation here. Number two, you'll notice that I have a holding blind at every station if I'm going to retire them. If I'm not going to retire them, it may not be necessary, but I would encourage you to put holding blinds out there even if you're not going to retire them. The reason why I like to put the holding blinds out there is because it helps the dog identify the destination when it arrives there. If the dog is on the way out to any one of these retrieves and they get 40 or 50 yards from the retrieve and they spot the holding blind, they're going to go, oh, there's a destination. There's a clue. I might as well go to that place. And if the dog goes to that place and they stop and they look for the bird, they're going to find one. I don't have any short marks in this test. The reason why I don't have any short marks is because I want the dog to give every mark equal attention. If I have a short mark that's in the dog's face, they might be a little preoccupied with it. So if I do all of these things, if I remove any factors from the field, if I make sure that I design a test that has no traps, if I make sure there's enough clues that can identify a destination as the dog approaches it, now I'm setting up a test that's highly likely to guarantee success. All I want is simplicity. All right. Kelsey, go ahead and put up slide 10 for me. I've got to get set up here so I can stand up and show you guys a few things. Okay, so in this wide open equidistant triple, one of the things that I want to do is to come to line with my dog's spine facing the center of the test. If my dog's spine is facing the center of the test, pointed at the center of the test, now they can turn their head to the left or the right and see the birds thrown without having to move their feet. That's important to me. I don't want to encourage foot movement. And when I move around to show the dogs the marks, that's all they should have to move is their head. Remember earlier, though, I said if they have a little lateral foot movement, I'm okay with that. But they better not stand up and they better not move forward. So come to line, have your dog sit on the mat facing the center of the test. Kelsey, you can go ahead and take that slide down. And I've got to fix up my camera here. All right. Okay. Now, what you also need to know about this test is the order of the throws. I typically want to make sure that I have a push and a pull. I want to practice those mechanics of pushing and pulling the dog to see throws. I want them to learn how to read my body language to get them looking in different directions. So I usually start with one outside bird or the center bird, that's obvious. And I'm going to have a big swing in one direction and a smaller swing in the other. So I'm going to give you an example here. Perhaps I start with the mark in the center of the test. When I come to line, if the next mark is to the right, that's the second bird I'm going to show the dog. I need to step forward a little bit here. So the dog is sitting down facing the center of the test. I've got them looking at the first bird down, which is the center gun. When I go to show them the gun station at the right-hand mark, what I want to do is step back, if they're on my left, step back, drag my feet, and turn. I actually want to do that quite abruptly too. Because if I'm abrupt, if I really move, that's the cue that's going to help the dog turn with me. If they don't turn with me, I'm just going to lightly tap my leg and say here, and that'll get them to turn their head to look in this direction. Once the dog has picked out that gun station, the next thing I'm going to do is go for a walk. I need to walk forward and turn, continuing to walk forward. And what that's going to do is push the dog's head around to the left. Again, I need to practice these mechanics because this is what's going to make sure that my dog sees all the birds when they're throwing. That's why we have the big wide open spread. The second reason why we have the big wide open spread is when I do all of this movement, now what's likely to happen is my dog's probably going to move forward, or it's a possibility. For those of you that go to a hunt test and find their dog moving around a lot, but you find in training they're not moving forward at all, so you don't get opportunities to enforce the standard, this is the test that's going to help you with that. In training, a lot of our tests are really tight, so we don't stimulate a lot of movement. But when we're doing a wide open triple, which forces us to have all this movement, now our dogs tend to move forward because we stimulate that with our own movement. But it gives us the opportunity to enforce the standard for no forward movement. It creates a state of mind where the dog recognizes that they need to maintain the standards themselves. They're responsible for that. When I have a dog that knows they have to maintain standards, I have their head. Now I can communicate more easily with them because they're open to accepting information. So once I've shown them the left mark, the last thing to do before the marks are thrown is to step back, dragging my feet, and use any cues that I need, tapping my leg or lifting my outside leg and saying sit to push in order to get them looking at the center gun station, because that's the one that's going to be thrown first. Moving on to the next set of steps is what we need to do when the birds are thrown. So the first thing I need to do is call for the mark, give them a wave, call in the radio, and the gunner will shoot and throw or blow the duck, call and throw, whatever you'd like to do. And once that bird hits the ground, step forward a little bit here so I'm in the right position. Once that bird hits the ground, again, Move backwards abruptly, drag your feet, turn and face the mark to the right. Once you've done that, if the dog hasn't turned, tap your leg and say here. Teach them what that communication meant when you step back. When you tap your leg and say here, that will pull their head to the right. Once they're looking in the right direction, then you can signal for the gunner to throw. Once that has happened and the bird is on the ground, now step forward, go for your walk, making sure that you're also turning in the right direction to face the next retrieve. You'll notice that I walked forward toward that last gun station. And when I do all of that, I must focus on what my dog is doing. If they're moving forward, I need to make those corrections and insist on the standard and have all those birds picked up, and we start over. It's denial of retrieve. The standard for my dog, in order to get a retrieve, is no forward movement. All right, so if we've moved forward and we've turned and the dog hasn't moved, we can signal for the mark to be thrown. Once the bird is on the ground and we feel the dog is steady, now we can send the dog. I often put my hand in before I send on any go bird to make sure that the dog doesn't leave. If I always put my hand in on go birds, now the dog is expecting that and they know they shouldn't go until they see my hand. All right, next set of mechanics here. The dog is coming back in from the go bird. I have to decide what bird I'm going to pick up next. In this wide open triple, it doesn't matter which mark your dog picks up next. But what I want you to do is, as the dog is coming back, I want you to turn and face the direction of the next retrieve. If it's straight ahead, if it's up the center, face that way. If it's to the right, face that way. You can look over your shoulder and keep an eye on your dog and make sure there's no funny business going on. But I want you to start communicating with your body what the next mission is. And we'll assume that it's up the center. I don't care which one you pick in this test. Let's assume it's up the center. And as that dog is coming in, I want them to turn and line their spine up with the next retrieve. I'm not going to take that bird until their spine is lined up correctly. If I have to ask them to heel a little bit, or if I have to lead them and ask them to bring their front feet toward me, I will, in order to get their spine pointed in the right direction. I want to adjust my handler position so I'm right beside them in the right place. I want to take that bird and get rid of it. Now I have to pause, just like I said. I let the dog answer all those questions that they might have. I'm looking for the tells, and this is where you need a big pause, guys. Don't rush this part. It's the most important part. You want your dog to have clarity before you send them. And if you can't see those tells, if you don't see those tells, they're likely not ready. Once your dog is ready, I missed a step in there. I forgot, once you take the bird, pause, let them survey the situation. Let them survey the situation. And while they're doing that, you can assess where they're looking. And once you've given them that time, then you jump to that next step that I just went over. Now, once you see the right tells and your dog is definitely looking in the correct direction, they've targeted correctly, now you can put your hand in and send the dog. And repeat the step for the last mark. Great. So those are essentially the mechanics of this test. And what will happen here is, because we've made the marks so easy that our dogs can't fail, they're going to go out there and they're going to find the bird in all likelihood. We've left a big clue out in the field, which is that holding blind. We've made sure there's no factors in the field that are pushing or pulling them offline. We've made sure that there's nothing en route to the retrieve that's going to cause them to stop and hunt early and get lost. And I don't care if the dog goes to the correct side or incorrect side of the holding blind, or if it's gunner standing in the field. I don't care if they go to the correct side or incorrect side. This test is not designed to work on accuracy. This test is designed to work on memory and memory alone, the mechanics associated with it, creating confidence. And if my dog arrives at the correct destination and they stop and put on a hunt, good for them. If they find the bird, great. Now I'm creating that state of mind I need to create. I'm getting comfortable with the mechanics. My dog is getting comfortable with the tempo. I'm getting comfortable with the tempo. Most people aren't comfortable slowing down, and that's what this test requires. All right. So I have a challenge for you guys now. My challenge for you is to try to do one wide open equidistant triple a week. If you can blend that into your training program, designed the way that I've gone over tonight, number one, you're going to become more fluid at your mechanics. Number two, your dog's going to gain the confidence they need to do these tests. Your communication skills are going to improve. Your success is going to improve. I can't stress this enough. So much of the training that we do at the advanced level causes all of these things to deteriorate. This is what's going to be the balance for that stuff. Give me 1 second here, folks. I'm going to move some things around. All right. You know, I think most handlers think their dog is a good marker or they're not a good marker. And you might go out and throw some birds and hope your dog figures it out, but you're not teaching your dog marking. You're just testing it over and over again and calling that training. And often this is how we fail our dogs. Marking is trainable. It's sequenced. It's intentional. Whether we've got a young puppy or we're running dogs at the all age level. Every test we set up is built with a purpose. It's done in a specific order for a specific reason. It's not random birds thrown to see what happens. And while you can accomplish a lot by going out and running this one drill, it in itself is just a small part of what makes an outstanding marking program. But if you want to learn more about this, if you want to learn more about a path forward, if you want more clarity, come and join me in Fetch. Check it out. You can join Fetch for 10 days at no risk. If you don't like what you see, you can cancel your membership. I'll give you your money back. That's for sure. And when you join Fetch, the first thing that I do is I send you an email and I ask you to join me for an onboarding meeting. It's an hour-long session where you tell me about your dog, your goals, your problems, your sticking points, and we come up with a plan together to move forward. It's webinars like this one, Q&A sessions that we do twice a month. It's access to me anytime you have a problem or you want to talk about your training plan or you want to know what to do to get ready for your Master National or the national championship that you're going to. I want to remind you that Fetch is open right now for enrollment, and I only open enrollment 2 or 3 times a year. And the opportunity to enroll will end on July 30th. So if you're thinking about joining or you want to learn more about it, go to my website, www.theretrievercoach.com/fetch to learn more about it. What we're going to do now is we're going to open it up to questions. I know you guys have probably been putting a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to let Kelsey throw those at me, and we'll go over them.
Thanks, Kevin. We do have several questions. What distance do you recommend for the wide open triple?
That's a great question. So if you're running hunt tests and your dog is at the advanced level, senior and master level, then I would suggest distances up to 150, 175 yards. I know your test maxed out at about 150 yards, I believe. So you want to try to hit those distances. Distance really isn't what makes a mark hard. Once a dog has experience running longer marks as singles, it certainly can do them as multiples as long as we make them easy, right? We're trying to give the dog positive experiences here. But go ahead and give them marks at the maximum distances or close to it. If we're running dogs for field trials, I typically like 300 to 350 yards, in about there. If I don't have a field that's quite large enough to do that, and that allows me to open it up, shorten it up a bit, maybe it's 250 yards. But I like those distances. Um, the dogs can do that and still be successful. Uh, if you have a young dog, a dog that's not running those competitions yet, I'm going to refer to my flow chart now, the fetch training flow chart, which is the complete system of training. I suggest that you begin doing this when you get to the intermediate skill building level. So that would be right after we sort of finish up the T work in the yard. We've done a lot of marking development before this time. We've been doing multiples before this time, but this is about the place that I suggest starting to do the wide open equidistant triple. And of course, depending on where your dog is and how long the marks have been for that dog up to that point, that's what will determine how long the marks are for your wide open equidistant triple.
Thanks, Kevin. Guys, he just mentioned a flow chart, and if you'd like to see kind of how Kevin structures his both mark and blind training, I went ahead and put that flow chart at the top of the fetch page that he just mentioned. So www.theretrievercoach.com/fetch. There's a yellow bar right at the top. You can download that flow chart if you want to take a closer look. Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Next question for you. Hoping you can dig into this a little more. Those, of course, that run hunt tests, we cannot point out the marks to the dog before they are thrown at the event. So can you discuss, how that helps us at the event? How does running these marks with gunners in white coats in training prepare us for these events where we can't point out these marks? Kind of just talk about why we would train differently than we would test.
Definitely, I think that's a great question. We often train differently than we would test because it allows us to teach skills, to teach concepts, to train on the mechanics. And yes, you are correct. When you're at a hunt test, you're certainly not allowed to point out the gun stations when you go to line. So don't start doing that. But one of the, or many of the things, some of the many things that you're going to have to be able to do is be able to practice or perform the mechanics that allow your dog to target a destination before you send the dog for the mark. Remember, when you go to line to show your dog the marks, you feed the dog push-pull cues to get them looking in the right direction to pick out the gun station. Now, when you're at a hunt test, you can't do that, but you're going to use those very same skills, the push-pull cues, to get them to target a destination before you send them for those memory retrieves. After the birds have been thrown and the dog has retrieved the first bird, you're going to use the exact same mechanics to get your dog lined up and mentally prepared for those memory retrieves. And using standout guns in the field to give your dog a target to look at allows you to practice those skills and give meaning to that communication more easily. That's why we have the standout guns out in the field. So even if you're running hunt tests, use white coats often. As I said, 70% of the time. This is just one of the reasons why I do it in the equidistant triple. There are many other reasons why I use standout guns, even if I'm training for hunt tests. But in this case, it's really to practice the mechanics of targeting and to teach the dog the mechanics of moving with you as the birds are thrown. Remember, we use the exact same mechanics to show the dog all of the gun stations before they're thrown. We'll use the exact same mechanics to make sure the dog is looking in the right direction when the birds are being thrown. And those are things you can do at a hunt test. So we're just taking multiple opportunities in the same training setup to practice mechanics. The more reps we get in doing something, the easier it is for the dog to understand what it is we're trying to teach them. Kelsey?
Kevin, when you are preparing for a memory retrieve and you've used your push-pull information, you've got the dog targeted appropriately, Do you use a cue of any sort to confirm with the dog that he's looking in the right direction?
Rarely. I don't use a verbal cue. I find I'm a minimalist online. Once I've fed the dog information to look in a given direction, what I wait for is for the dog to look out there and go, well, wait a second, why am I looking in this direction? Especially if it's retired, right? So why am I looking in this direction? Wait a second. I remember looking in this direction earlier and seeing a person standing in the field. Now, where was that person? Well, they were out there about 150 yards or 250 yards. That's right. Uh, so which way did they throw? Well, they threw to the left. Was it angle back? Was it angle in? Was it flat? Did it land by that, I don't know, bush? This is what I'm allowing my dog to go through. And as they're asking those questions, I'm watching the dog's body language. Don't forget, I'm looking for the tells that is indicating to me that my dog understands the mission. And if the dog understands the mission, all I need to do next is send the dog. So one of the things that I might do, I don't always do it, and I don't want to elaborate too deeply because I feel like I'm getting into the weeds a little bit. One of the things I might do is put my hand in. My hand says, when I put my hand in the dog's upper peripheral vision, my hand says, you and I agree on the target. You and I agree on the mission. Get ready. I'm going to send you. And after a brief pause, the count of one steamboat, I'll send the dog. But I don't always put my hand in. Once I see the dog is ready, they're telling me they're ready. They're telling me they understand the mission. I don't have to tell them that they're right. Sending them is all that needs to be done. I find that when people get into a whole conversation up there using cues like, good, where's your mark? That's it, way out, easy, way back, all of those things, it starts to sound like a word salad, adds to the confusion, potentially creates anxiety. Being quiet gives the dog the opportunity to have a conversation with themselves, to ask them those questions. I will occasionally use some cues at the beginning of the conversation, like easy. Some people will use way out, but I'm a minimalist in this respect. I'm looking, and once the dog is looking in the right direction, give them the opportunity to problem solve on their own. They're quite capable of doing it, especially with practice. Kelsey?
Thanks, Kevin. Gosh, we've got a lot of questions, but I want to respect everyone's time. We're approaching that hour mark. So I think I've got one more question for you, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do with the rest of these. So Kevin, at a hunt test, especially HRC, we're often sitting on a stool or a bucket to while the birds are being thrown. Can we still use these mechanics as the dog is watching the birds be thrown from a bucket, or what do you suggest?
I suggest doing both, especially if you're going to be, I know in HRC tests, you're often sitting on a bucket. So I'd suggest practicing both. I would suggest teaching your dog the mechanics this way first, and then transitioning to a bucket. That way you can teach your dog not to move forward much more easily, or you can create the standard you want for no forward movement. Because remember, it's our body movement. When we move around on the line, that's what tends to stimulate the dog into moving forward. And those bigger cues of us moving forward and backward tend to help the dog learn or understand what they need to do when they see us moving around, to be looking in the right direction. But once you've created that, then I think you should spend some time teaching them how to move with you on a bucket. And then just practice both throughout the entirety of their career. I should mention here, and this is a good point to do it, that this is something that needs to be a staple of your training. Equidistant triples, wide open equidistant triples, built with the idea of simplicity, need to be done regularly throughout the entirety of your dog's career. This is what maintains the right state of mind. A dog needs to believe in themselves. You need to believe in your own capability. You need to be fluid. You can't be flustered and impatient. You can't be unsure. You have to have certainty when you're out there working with your dog online. That's what creates certainty in your dog. You have to have the right tempo and be comfortable with it. You have to give the dog time to ask and answer questions on their own. So don't ever stop doing this, because a lot of the training that we do doesn't do anything to help in these areas. In fact, it detracts from a lot of these areas. This is the balance that we need to have in order to maintain this area. And I promise you, if you go out there and you do this on a regular basis, you're going to see significant changes if your dog is struggling with multiple retrieves. And it will happen quickly. Kelsey, I think is there anything else? We're going to wrap it up there.
I think so. We've got so many questions, guys. I'm sorry we're not going to get to them all. We'd be here till tomorrow. So I think we'll cut it there, Kevin.
Yeah, again, guys, I thank you for joining me, but I would ask you one favor, and that is to go to my website and check out what Fetch is. Talk to your friends, your training partners, and send them to my website, www.theretrievercoach.com/fetch, to investigate what Fetch is. I have put so much work into this. It continues to grow. It's a living piece of work, meaning I'm constantly adding to it, improving it. We have a great team here at the Retriever Coach that is doing everything to make everybody's journey in retriever training enjoyable. That's what I want you guys to do, is to experience more joy, to not feel stuck. And so check out Fetch and come and join me. I'd love to have that one-on-one call with you to talk about your goals, help you with your training plan, and help you work through any problems that you might have. Have a great night, everybody.